Great. Huangmin, you have the first one for today.
Okay, and first, I will share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen now? Yeah, okay, I have two items today. The first one is a fun story of debugging and fixing an inaccurate replica and Runway classification. So basically in the Rabbit action, I created an instrumentation to classify whether a query is to the replica or to the primary. However, someone told me that it is not really correct because we still have some housekeeping on the table query from the other balancing ourselves that doesn't go through the balancing. So it's really hard to tell whether a query is to the Replica or the Replica. So that creates a really confusion in the Rabbit action, and eventually we have to change subject of Rabbit actions. So I have to debug that issue, and I found that it's kind of fun that the first case is that we do have some housekeeping query. For example, we do query the epoch from the last reply timestamp just to like guess whether a replica is caught up on the caught up with the referee or not. And that query is the inside the load balancing without go through the horn connection proxy stuff inside the load balancing. That's the first case. And the second case is more fun, which is related to our schema one. And internally, active record actually creates some like dummy pool to query for the schema. So somehow it creates its own pool and creates like even before initializing a Postgre connection. So okay, this one will explain better. So for example, those are the two queries that is triggered by the active record, and internally it will raise some dummy pools to trigger this record. So it's really hard to tell whether the query is the source of the query, because it's like the temporary pool created by internal active record. So it is not from our memory, it is not from our load balancing connection pools. So it's still impossible to get what is the source of the query. So right now I'm just putting it as the unknown source to indicate that we don't really know what, where, or how, and the destination of the queries. And it's the one of the like the disadvantage of our approach in the load balancing layer. We implemented our own load balancing layer. However, the approach we are choosing is to implement the proxy on the top of the connection object. So that's why it's really hard to tell whether a query is destination. And in Rail 6, the rest already supported the load balancing with the ground and the shading functionality. And the way it's do is to add a symbol flag replica is true inside the database configuration. I found that is the better way to do that. And we should definitely migrate on the load balancing to use the Rail 6, although it's still requires a big effort and well, a lot of testing as well. This is the first one. And the second one is the overall concept offloading the oversized payload to the object storage. So in some incident before, we used to have a problem with the oversized payload that will overload our Redis cluster. So after we implement the track and the raise mod to verify whether it is a big issue and prevent someone to push the big payload into the scikit, we come up with a new approach to just to offload on the oversized payload into the object storage in case of that the payload is like big enough. And somehow we never finished the root concept. And right now I implemented thanks the merge request for that. There's some issue with the approach, but I will show how it works first. And right now we have some flag environment variable, which is the scikit Scalability mod, and there are three mods. The first one is the tracking mod, which is just putting out the blocks whether when the payload is just oversized. And the second mod is the raise mod, which is to raise an exception so that the clients will know whether a job is oversized and prevent it from pushing into Redis. And the final one is the upload mod. And when we set the upload button here, when we schedule a cyclic job, it will push on the job pilot into the object storage, and it will based on the middleware at the server to restore the object storage, and restore the arguments of the pilot and let the job process as normal. I will demo it a little bit. And I'm setting the current size is to 30 bytes so that we can test it easily. Okay, so I will start with this worker. If we set the pilot, normally it will just like process like normally nothing happens. And if we increase the number of pilot, like I set the 30 byte, you can see that I put some more item into the pilot. The first one is the uploading flag, and the second one is the upload path. And when the job is pushing to the object storage, it is visible in the our object storage. Okay, so, yeah, like this one. And after it process the work, this payload will be deleted from the object storage. Yeah. And when follow this approach, I have some concern. The first one is that our object storage helpers are really tight coupling to the active record. So it's really hard to do my job, which is just to put a file to the object storage and load it down. We have to create some like a model and mount the horn object storage into that model. We don't have other way. So I have put in some hack into the group concept, and this is not very nice. So it's the first concern. And the second one is that there are some risk of some operational risk that it will increase the complexity of the flow. And maybe when in the normal case, it will even create more problems, even more than the oversight of itself. So I'm just implement a book concept to see whether we should follow this or not. And I put a lot of concern and comment inside the group concept, and you guys can read the whole merge request to leave some review into that. So any questions?
I haven't actually reviewed it yet. I was just wondering, I mean, we could create a model for the sidekick job arguments, right? It would be a bit weird, but we could do that.
Yeah, we could, but I think
I don't think we shouldn't, because that's one of the things that we saw with well, when uploading stuff with carrier wave and this model thing with mounts and the long transactions and stuff. You know? So if we can avoid the model altogether, that was one of the questions I had on the merge request. Are we creating one of those upload records here?
No, it doesn't. I mean, Fox
really?
is not to.
Yeah, so currently it pretends it's an upload, but it's not, I think.
Yeah, it's not. And it's kind of a workaround for me. So
I think that's
it's not a real solution.
I think that's better for this use case. Yeah. But I did ask on the merge request as well, should we? Because I couldn't find any occurrences. Like we have the thing in track mode running in production right now, don't we?
No, well, we eventually somehow that issue is lagging behind, so we haven't enabled the track mode, even the track mode, but based on the Kibana, we are still have some big job payload inside Ocean.
So I think we should probably get a handle on how many jobs that we currently have like that. Like just run the track mode and see what comes out.
Yeah.
And then see if this is worth doing, or if it's actually limited enough to just create issues for the stage groups to fix the workers, and then put the thing in raise mode and like not deal with it.
Okay.
I don't know, like it's because I don't know how, I haven't actually looked into how often this happens.
Okay, I will collect more data and put into the original issue before we moving ahead with this approach.
I mean, generally, if you can have like a cross like an approach that works for everyone rather than getting every team to kind of implement their own thing. Is that what you're proposing, Bob? Is that just leave it to teams to address?
It depends. It depends because I don't know what jobs are currently too big and what's causing them to be too big.
For example, I'll bet you that if you ask a team to take it out to do that, I'll bet you more than one team will take it and stick it into Redis cache. Right? Like these are the kind of things where it's really good to have infrastructure that works kind of across the board, and so that's what I really like about this. It's a kind of a general approach, which I really like.
But
it is a general approach, and it will prevent big issue from coming back in the future. And in return, it will work exchange for the complexity during our daily operations.
I understand the appeal of a general approach, but it feels to me like we're going into we're going into a corner where we're not using these things like they're intended. Like if you have something that's very large, it probably shouldn't be a JSON payload, because just to access it, you need to unwrap the JSON. So you have another problem that you have a very large JSON payload. And yeah, one thing that bugs me a little bit is that this happens only some of the time. So it'd be nice if you have something that's just uniform and that's just the way we throw things around, instead of some jobs trigger this thing. But sorry, I feel I'm being very much on the negative side here, but those are some things that come to mind. And a third thing that comes to mind is garbage collection, but that's just an implementation thing. But we cannot rely on the jobs running and deleting the things from object storage. So,
but we can set an expiration that is way longer than a retry thing on object storage, can't we?
If all of them
and thinking of
support
like
expiration,
I mean the object storage only support the life cycle. So basically, we can set the life cycle to about 30 days, and after that on, the days by work will be expired and
that's
deleted
fine.
from the
But I wonder if what people really want is to throw large things around, and we just saw that it's really hard to have an upload because you had to hack the model and fight carrier wave. Should we maybe be making it easy? Also, because Andrew just said people are just going to throw things in Redis cache. Should we have a thing that it's easy to throw large blobs into? Instead of saying just put your large blob as a base 64 in a JSON, and if we think it's too large, then it will somehow get decoded again for you on the other end. Is that the interface? Is that the idea? I mean, it's a good interface because it's simple. It's hard to do it wrong, or you can do it. We won't let people do it wrong. But is that the tool we want to give people? Or do we want to give them easy uploads, like Scratch uploads?
Well, I think basically when someone come up new workers, they will meet a really like small payload at first, and the payload will eventually grow at the limit. And somehow people will be bugged by why it gets so large. And it's what already happened with the recent incident. Of them are really normal workers. They don't have any special insight, but eventually someone will have like larger payload than other customers. So it's really hard to like implement the right way at first, and if it even create some overhead for them. So I would prefer some like automatic solution for that instead of like create an interface, and we are really not sure whether they are aware that the payload is big enough.
People don't know if they need the interface.
Yeah, it's true.
I think maybe where I'm coming from is if that people regularly do this, then they shouldn't be sticking 50 megabyte things into JSON fields to begin with. Then that 50 megabyte thing should probably be a blob. But we don't know if people regularly doing this. That's also what Bob maybe was getting at. And yeah, it is nice to have a universal failsafe.
I think if we want to pass big blobs around, that object storage is a good idea. I think that it would be nice to have a universal way to do that that is not maybe tied to the like we need to look into how we want to do that, because uploading from within the Ruby thing, especially from requests, is maybe something we want to avoid.
What about if we had like a hard limit on Sidekick jobs, and we said no Sidekick job can be greater than 10 megabytes, but then we also had like a mix-in or something that did the upload? Because I don't like it being automatic for everything, but to have an easy route for people to kind of move their services to object storage. So we know what the problematic, if something goes wrong in the application and you just get some Sidekick job that suddenly has really big things, we don't want that just to kind of silently start going to object storage, because rather have that fail. Yeah.
If that currently only happens twice a week, is it worth building the infrastructure for? I don't know how often it happens.
Yeah, that's where we need more data.
Yeah, okay. Maybe we will need to collect more data and come up with another approach, and maybe we'll continue discussing on this before because it's like we don't have anything to talk about that right now.
But the implementation is much simpler than I thought it would be. So it's definitely like worth looking further into if we deem it necessary.
Okay, cool.
I have
the second item, the next is yours.
Oh. Yeah, so it's just a thing that Huao was, I'm not sharing my screen, let me do that. Huao pointed me to this infrastructure issue when I was working with the package team on the stage group dashboard, and in that, I noticed that Registry is one of our best performing services, but we don't look at it very hard. The reason is the thresholds that are defined are quite tight, and we meet them quite often. That's good, but the requests that we're measuring are very diverse. So there are some upload requests and so on in there that are much slower than the gets and the heads for the manifest, which is what I'm extracting in this first merge request. So the idea is to, because the registry only has a limited set of routes that it needs to serve, is to extract some of them out of the main server component into a custom, a more suited SLI, a more suited Aptex SLI. I've gone ahead and built something like that and asked Craig for feedback. The main things that were coming out of it was if we extract the fast route, we need to be careful that the Aptex that we're extracting them from doesn't start failing, because we've extracted a whole bunch of fast things out, and now what's left is relatively slow, so that starts failing. I've paid attention to that, and we also need to make sure that we don't count requests double and that we don't miss anything. So if we extract a route out, like here, the manifest route, we need to make sure that we have both the gets and the heads, which are fast, and the deletes and the puts, I think, which are slower. So yeah, that's what I've been working on, a kind of a little framework in the run books and a wall of JSON to hide this behind, so we can extract more routes out, and we don't miss any methods for routes and so on, that kind of stuff. That's what I've been doing on the side. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, when I saw that issue, I was really happy. Mostly because it was like a development person that had raised it, so they understood how the SLIs were working, and they saw an opportunity to mature them. And I was so happy when I saw that issue, and then even more happy when I saw you working on it, Bob. So thank you for making my day, or maybe my week.
But it's been a little bit slow going. It's been one of the things I'm working on the side, but it's I thought it was important enough to start looking into, because the registry stream is like doing this architecture change with the database and so on. So it'd be nice if we had a little bit of a better handle what the thing's doing.
No, it makes sense. And I remember when they were originally put, I think it was like a 10-second threshold for everything. So, which is actually like really slow for like a head request, right?
Yeah, but it's not for an upload. But now,
yeah,
like
for an upload. Now we
thresholds, the thresholds that we have on the server component are really tight. But that's fine, because I think most of the requests are like super fast heads and gets. So we don't know if an upload is slow.
Yeah, so we're taking a risk, like you mentioned, by splitting those. But yeah, we'll probably get a better understanding of what's going on. I was looking at Gitaly aptX SLIs the other day, and I noticed that it's only unary SLI, so that's a little bit like only doing the gets and the heads, and anything that would be a post or a put, except the gRPC version, we don't even count, if I read that correctly.
Yeah, I can give you some history on why that is, Jaco.
Sure.
But it's pretty boring.
Yeah, well,
the biggest reason is that there was still a lot of change, and with the BiDi and the streaming requests, gRPC, basically you have to review them on a per endpoint basis, because some of them, they do lots and lots of stuff, and some are only just because the server's generating a lot of data that it's sending back. But so it's much harder to kind of keep an SLI like up to date. With the unary ones, it's like you send a request, you get a response, and you can measure it very quickly. But with the streaming ones, it's almost like you have to review each one. And so
that's what I figured.
Why that decision was made.
Yeah, that's what I figured when I looked at it. But it seems to work well enough. So that's fine. But it's slightly surprising that the streams are. Yeah, exactly. Like if something's wrong, then the unary ones will also slow down, and then we know something's wrong.
That's the thing.
Yeah, the thing I missed there was the. Yeah. Anyway, maybe I should have an agenda item for the next thing, and when we're still talking about Bob's thing. Is there another?
I'm finished. You can have a thing.
Okay. Then I'll talk for a moment about the back objects cache and the troubles we've had there. So a few weeks ago, we did an experiment where we disabled the Preclone Script for GitLab or GitLab for a short period, and everything looked fine. And then I concluded, okay, everything is fine. So now we just need to finish building this, and we're done. So on Tuesday, I made that configuration change, and then my day was over, and I I'm home, but I went home, and I came back into work the next day, and it turned out that the SRE on call decided to turn it off because the aptX was degrading. And when I turned it on, I noticed the aptX got worse, but I explained that away in my head. Oh, we lost Rachel. I explained away the aptX degradation because I thought, well, if these Git fetches are part of the aptX and we're fetching more data, then it's only natural that that takes longer. But so if post upload pack would have been part of the aptX, then it would have made sense that the aptX would have gotten worse, but it wasn't. So already at that point, I could have noticed that something was wrong. And that just got worse through the day. And then the SRE on call made the call to turn it off, which was right, because things were slowing down. So yeah, then I learned a little bit more about how those aptXs work. And yeah, that looks, nice thing is that it looks like they work well. I looked at one example, like find commit, which has nothing to do with git fetch, and you could see it slow down the moment we made the config change. So that's unrelated, and it shouldn't slow down. So the fact that that slowed down and then that triggers alerts is good. But it does leave the epic in a unfortunate state, because I made it all about we can turn off the Preclone Script, and now we can't. And now we're going to stop the epic because we're out of time. And it's sort of a sad conclusion to the story. We built something that made Falconario 1 better, but we can't turn off the other thing. And if anybody else wants to use it, maybe you need a Preclone Script too. almost makes me wonder if we shouldn't have built this, but should have built something else. But yeah, that's where we are with that.
So nobody is using this right now?
Is
It's
using
not
what?
on, the backup that cache, like it's not on for any of the.
It's on
any
everywhere.
further. Ah, okay.
It's
But we can't turn off the Preclone script.
Yeah, the example case I was working on was Falcon Aerial 1, which only survives because of the Preclone script. And the outcome I was aiming for was to say, okay, if you have a heavy CI workload, then that's a problem. And we used to have a custom solution that is not part of the product, but you can copy paste it and glue it together and hope that it keeps working, and that you have the quality team to look after it. Well, you don't, because we have a quality team, but that's just for us. So I wanted to replace that and promote it to a feature that just works transparently for everybody. And it's not that, or it's hard for us to argue that it is. For some people, it may be that, but it's not very convincing if we cannot lean on it ourselves. So that's sort of where we are now with the project.
And do we have a tangible result on all of the other Git release servers benefiting from this?
Yeah, that's a bit hard. You can look at cache hit rates, and then you see that there are cache hits, and that's great, but users don't care about cache hits. So you can see the aptex improve on Falcon Aerial 1. I'm not sure if we saw a global aptex improvement because of this.
So Jakob,
yeah.
like I started putting some stuff on that issue 954, because to me, like, something doesn't add up still. You know, we see, like, you know, we spoke about it briefly, but the things that are dropping are like which one was it? The upload pack drops off, but I don't know, there was a whole bunch of signals on that issue that just, to me, it feels like there's still something that we like. So many signals are really good, and then other signals have kind of remained the same, even though we have a really high cache rate, for example, cache hit rate.
Yeah.
And then you look at kind of like the fundamentals of the machine, and they sort of haven't changed at all. And to me, there's like a disconnect there. Like, if we're getting this 65% cache hit rate, why aren't we seeing that in the you know, scheduling or CPU or like some of the other places on the machine?
I almost think it's the other way around, which is I think that there's a bottleneck somewhere that we're not seeing, and we were maybe never saturating the machine. We were hitting some other bottleneck, and maybe, well, we're doing better on that now, but
yeah.
Well, I guess we were saturating the machine when it was at 100% CPU. That was pretty clear. So that is not happening. But yeah, I also just understand too little of what's wrong. And if I would have realized the aptex problem on Tuesday when the thing was on, I would have gathered more data, gotten profiles, and tried to understand what the machine was busy doing. But I didn't.
Well, we could turn it on, gather the data, and turn it off. Turn it off, gather the data, and then turn it back on again.
Sure.
Just for us, so.
Yeah. That also means that we drag on the project for longer, or do you propose we do that outside the epic, Rachel?
How much time would we need to turn it on for, and how much time will it take to analyze the result?
It's the second part that like, if we have it on for an hour, that we can get enough data. It needs to ramp up, but it ramps up in 15 minutes or less. So if I turn it on near the end of a weekday, an hour is enough, I think. But then there's data, and then we need to see if we can come up with hypotheses and try things. And then the moment you want to try something, you need to submit a merge request, wait for it to be deployed, and it becomes an ongoing.
Should we gather the data and come up with the next plan, and then make the next plan the next thing we work on?
Well, it seems strange to not gather the data, I guess, now that I've said this out loud
100%.
and said like some things. Also, Andrew's saying like something doesn't add up. So
there's so many good signals, right? And then there's just a few that don't tie together. And like, I'm sure that we can kind of figure there'll be some like aha moment, right? That's kind of my feeling on this.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking about how much time it would take to analyze the result, because I agree with Bob. It feels odd to do this and then not gather the data at the end of it. And as you said, if you'd been online when that had happened, you would have gathered the data before it got before the script got switched on again. So I think it is definitely worth gathering the data, and I think it is worth some kind of time boxed exercise for analyzing what we see inside of that. Because what I don't want to do is say, get the data, and then we spend the next 2 weeks analyzing what's in there and figuring out what's going on. But I think it's worth spending maybe a day, maybe 2 days, seeing if there's anything inside that data that we can find. And it doesn't have to be you alone looking through that data as well. Like, perhaps bring in Matt to see if there's something that he can spot in there, since you guys have been chatting quite a bit.
I'd love to pair with you as well on that, Jakob.
That's great, thanks. Okay, so I'll make that a separate issue to just for collecting and analyzing the data, so that we have an alternative ending. like I hope the ending was we turned it on and it worked, and we have an alternative ending, like we turned it on and we learned this.
And I think that issue can be part of the epic still. I think this is the round out of that. And
that's what I meant. Yeah, the ending of the epic, because otherwise the epic just feels like it's had this strange conclusion.
Yeah, let's get to the conclusion, and then we can decide if that's what we're going to do about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe you can just figure out endings until we find one we like.
As long as you find one you like within a day or two, it's fine.
No rush. Okay. Thanks for the discussion, everyone.
Is there anything else that anyone would like to talk about?
Andrew, would you like to show the timeline things?
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
I'll just quickly show that. I did some work on it yesterday, so I guess actually the first thing is that here we go. So I realized that firstly, Timeland is obviously this Jupyter Notebooks OKR that kind of became like its own thing. And obviously because it started off as Jupyter Notebooks, it started off as Markdown. So it's got a kind of a weird origin story. But the code was all in these code cells in a Markdown document that was translated into Jupyter Notebook that gets generated into report. And so it was always really horrible to use. And then I realized that you can just do imports from a local directory. So you can keep all your code in Python now. So instead of having like editing code blocks with your code in it, you can actually start moving over to Python. And then, hey, you could actually start even having unit tests and other things that sane people use. So that's the first step, which I think has really helped kind of speed up the development now, because I can actually work in Python and not in Markdown code. So that's pretty cool. And so yesterday I did that, and then I spent some time kind of gathering a couple of requests that people have made over the last few weeks. And the first one was Christopher in the InfraDev meeting said that he wanted to see the threshold at which we were alerting on the graph. So that's the first thing we've got there. We've got that little dotted line, which is what we call the hard threshold. And so that's in there now. And then the second thing that we did was we added I added the dates which we expect to violate. So this over here is the expected value. It's kind of the middle, the most expected value. And so you can see there that's the 13th of July. Hopefully it's not a Friday. And then what I also put in is this 80% confidence interval. I also include as like a pessimistic value the date at which that crosses the threshold. And then just for good measure, like the data, which is going to hit 100% as well. So I got some new things, and then I also got it so that we finally have permalinks on these things. So if you want to refer someone to something in the report, you can just click on a little that and then send them a link and it'll go right there. Very exciting stuff. This needs a refresh. And then the last thing that I did was I had quite a few people keep asking me, like, what's happening with Preclone and all the saturation on there. And so I just figured that it would be better to move that into its own thing. And I plan to do the same thing for Redis. So if you're only interested in Preclone, you can now just come to this page, and all it's got is the Preclone service. So it's all the metrics that we monitor for that server, all the resource metrics at least, and how they're growing and what's happening to them. And of course, it's also got the dates and the thresholds and everything like that. So yeah. And Sean has already given me some feedback. This is mostly why I'm bringing this up, because I'm looking for feedback. And Sean's feedback was that he would like to have these arranged from the expected value crossing the threshold first onwards. Does that capture your request, Sean?
Yeah, so basically the highest priority things first, the things that are going to hit their thresholds soonest are at the top.
Yeah. So disk space would probably be the first here, which is going to be 1st of May, for example, or 7th of May. And then, like from a roadmap point of view, what I'd really like to do with this is get these dates or days until into Prometheus, and then you could actually start tracking it and figuring out, then we can look over time to see if it's coming in, and you could even start alerting on it and stuff like that. But that's obviously, we don't need that yet. That's my demo.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else want to demo something? If not, I'll close out this call by saying this will be the last of the demos that is in this format. I mean, the format will stay the same, but my intention is that I'm going to create 2 calls instead of just having the one, so that there's an option for people in different time zones to join at different times. So if you haven't already indicated your availability on that sheet that I sent around, please do so. Andrew and Maren, I'm not sure if you'd also like to indicate yours there, or if you're just happy to join either of the calls when I do set them up for next week. If you do want the link, just send me a message in Slack and I'll send you the link for that. But thank you very much for all the demos. It's all looking good. Thank you so much. Hope you have a good rest of your day.